I have spent 40 years tuning pianos for a living, and I will tell you plainly, I have heard more music in that time than most men hear in 2 lifetimes. Concertos rehearsed at 3 in the morning, soloists warming up in empty halls, children hammering scales while their mothers read magazines in the lobby. After a while, the notes blur together like faces at a train station. You stop seeing them, you only see the crowd. I stopped seeing them until the night I met Marcus. It was the winter season at the Aldermere Concert Hall, the kind of venue where the chandeliers cost more than most people's homes, and the staff are expected to be invisible. I was there to tune the Steinway before the evening showcase, a competition for emerging composers, the sort of event that attracted wealthy patrons and 1 or 2 truly insufferable musicians. I had finished my work and was packing my tools into the case, near the stage door, when I heard the argument. It was coming from the corridor behind the loading dock. I recognized one of the voices immediately, Edvard Carlo, the celebrated guest conductor for the evening. He was a large man with a silver beard and a talent for making everyone around him feel slightly smaller than they actually were. I had tuned for him a dozen times over the years. He was speaking to someone I could not yet see, his voice carrying that particular amusement, the powerful reserve for people they have already dismissed. "Go on then," Carlo was saying. "You keep telling me you play, so play." I came around the corner with my case in hand and saw them. Carlo stood with 2 other patrons, a woman in a long wool coat and a red-faced man, whose tuxedo seemed to be losing an argument with his stomach. Facing all 3 of them, holding a mop he had not yet set down, was a young man I recognized as one of the hall's cleaning staff. I had seen him before, early 20s, shouldered, with the quiet, deliberate way of moving that comes from years of manual work. His name, I would learn later, was Marcus. He had been cleaning the backstage corridor when they found him. "If you can truly play the Steinway," Carlo said, drawing the words out, "I will personally stand up and applaud you, and if you cannot, you will stop telling the stagehands you can." He glanced at his companions with a smile. "We have 40 minutes before the hall opens. The stage is right there." He set his mop against the wall with great care. As though it mattered to him that it not fall, he said nothing. He simply walked past them, through the wing and onto the stage. I followed. I do not know why exactly. Perhaps I was curious. Perhaps I recognized something in the set of his shoulders, the particular calm of a man who has been underestimated so many times he has stopped being surprised by it. Carlo and his companions drifted in behind me, still amused, still talking quietly to one another. The house lights were up. The hall was empty except for us. Marcus sat down at my Steinway, the one I had spent an hour tuning that afternoon, and adjusted the bench with the practiced ease of someone who knew exactly what they needed. Carlo crossed his arms. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Marcus placed his hands on the keys. He did not make a show of it. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, took a breath, and began. The first thing I noticed was the touch. After 4 decades of listening, you learn that touch tells you everything. It tells you how long someone has lived with an instrument, how deeply they have loved it. This touch was not the touch of an amateur. It was gentle at the opening, a Schubert impromptu I knew well, the B-flat major, and he took it slowly, the way you handle something fragile and irreplaceable. The hall was designed to carry sound from that stage to the last row of the upper gallery, and in the emptiness of the space that evening, his playing filled every corner of it, without effort. I felt it before I quite understood what I was hearing. Then he moved into the second section, and the tempo shifted. The melody he had been coaxing out of the upper register began to find its weight. His left hand moved into territory I had not expected, choices that bent away from the text in the score, and came back to it in a way that was entirely his own. He was not decorating the piece. He was thinking inside it. Every phrase was shaped with intention. There was a patience to it, a willingness to let a note breathe before moving on, that you cannot teach and cannot fake. You either have it or you do not, and Marcus had it in full. I looked at Carlo. His arms had come uncrossed. He was standing very still. The Schubert opened into something else. A transition Marcus had written himself, I realized. A bridge between the impromptu and a melody I did not recognize. It was his own music. The key shifted down a minor third, and the theme that emerged was slower, deeper, carrying in it the feeling of a long walk home at the end of a long day. Not sad exactly, but weighted with the particular dignity of a life that has worked hard and asked for little. And it was extraordinary. There is a particular kind of composition that announces itself not by being loud or clever, but by being honest, by saying something that has the quality of a truth you have always known and never found words for. That was what I heard in those minutes. Marcus Bleet played as though the piece had been waiting inside the piano his entire life, and he had finally come to let it out. The red-faced man in the tuxedo sat down on the first step of the stage without appearing to notice he had done so. The woman in the wool coat pressed her fingers to her mouth. Marcus did not hurry the ending. He let the final phrase resolve slowly, the last chord hanging in the air of that enormous hall, the way the smell of rain hangs after a storm, present, then fading, then gone but not forgotten. His hands rested on the keys for a moment after the sound had ceased. The silence that followed was the best kind, the kind that means no one is willing to be the first to break it. Then Carlos stood up straight. I watched him do it. He had been leaning against the seat back in front of him without realizing it. And now he stood, and for a moment he said nothing at all. His expression was not the expression of a man who had been embarrassed. It was the expression of a man who had just been reminded of something he had once known, and had allowed himself to forget. He began to applaud, slowly at first, then with the full weight of both hands, the sound of it filling the empty house. Marcus turned on the bench and looked at him. He did not smile or nod or perform any of the gestures of triumph. He simply looked at Carlo the way a man looks at another man when something true has passed between them. How long? Carlo asked. His voice was different now. The amusement was entirely gone. Since I was 7, Marcus said. My grandfather had an upright in the back of his hardware store. He taught me. Carlo nodded slowly. He looked at the stage, at the Steinway. Marcus. Then he said, I would like to hear the rest of it. The rest of what? Marcus asked. That piece, the one that was yours. I picked up my tools case and walked quietly toward the stage door. I did not want to intrude on what was happening. I had tuned that piano that afternoon. I had done my job, and the instrument had done its job. And Marcus had done what Marcus was born to do. I did not need to be there for what came next. But I have thought about it many times since, and I know what I heard. Spent 40 years listening to music in rooms like that one, and I know the difference between playing and speaking. Marcus was speaking. He was saying something that had no other language, about loyalty, and about all the years of carrying something quietly, while the world saw only the mop and the uniform and the corridor that needed cleaning. When I reached the door, I could still hear Carlo's applause. It was the sound of a man keeping his word. That hall opened to its scents 40 minutes later. Marcus went back to the corridor and his work, and I drove home through the winter dark thinking that after 40 years I had stopped being surprised by music, and that Marcus had given me back the thing I had lost. Some gifts come from the most unlikely hands. That is not a surprise. That is, if you are paying attention, exactly how it was always going to be.